Okay, these are called perfect squares. The square root of a perfect square is an integer. Now, like these square roots, you know, like for example, the square root of 36 is 6, the square root of 64 is 8, the square root of 121 is 11. You know these. In fact, you can even make your life a little easier by just quickly square rooting all of these right here, so you can just kind of visually see them. Oops. Okay, so each of these is a perfect square, and the square root of each of them is an integer. An integer is a whole number. Okay, so like not a decimal. Okay, now an integer can be negative, it can be positive, it can be 0, but what it can't be is like 3.5. That's what it can't be. Okay, so each of these has a square root that's a whole number. Now, let's say I'm asked for the square root of a number like 65. Now that's not a perfect square, right? It's not up here. Okay, but here's what I do. I first ask myself, which perfect squares is it in between? So like, for example, if I'm looking at 65, I'm like, where's 65? Oh yeah, 65 is right here. It's a little bit past 64. So 65 is in between 64 and the next perfect square, which is 81. Okay, so that's what I did. Now, then I'm going to take the square roots to get integers. So the square root of 64 is 8. The square root of 81 is 9. Okay, so this is in between 8 and 9. Okay, now that's what I know so far, that this is in between 8 and 9. Okay, so I know that the number is in between 8 and 9. So I'm going to use this number line to kind of imagine, like I'm just going to write this lightly so that I can reuse this number line. Like this is 8 over here, this is 9. So this is 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, 8.8, 8.9, 9. Okay, so where does this land? Well, okay, first of all, I know it's between 8 and 9. So it's going to be 8 point something. Okay, now look, 65, which is it closer to? Is it closer to 64 or closer to 81? Oh, it's way closer to 64. I'm going to circle it just so I don't have to hold that in my head. In fact, not only is it closer to 64, it's just like 1 away from 64, right? Like if I'm counting 64, 65 is the next number. Whereas if I were to count from 65 all the way to 81, I'd have to count up 16 more times. So this is like way, way, way closer to 64. So I'm looking for a number that's in between 8 and 9, but it's way, way, way closer to 8. Okay, so if I'm looking for, here's 8 and 9, right? Here's like halfway between 8 and 9, but way, way, way closer to 8 is over here, right? So this would be, my estimate would be 8.1, would be my estimate for the square root of 65. Let's do the square root of 130. I'm going to come up here. Which is it in between? Oh, it's right here. It's in between the square root of 121 and the square root of 144. Okay, right? Because 130 is in between 121 and 144. I'm going to go ahead and take my square roots. This is 11 and this is 12. So I know that the square root of 130 is between 11 and 12. So it's going to be 11 point something. Now look, I'm going to change this. This is now my 11 and 12. Okay, now let's see. Is it closer to 121 or closer to 144? Well, let's see. If I were to count from 121 to 130, like, and just count and be like 122, 123, 124, 125, 126, I would have to count up 9 to get to 130. And then if I wanted to get up to 144, I'd have to count up 14 to get up to 144. So it's a little bit closer to the middle than this one was, but it's definitely closer to 121. Okay, so here's 11 and here's 12. So what I'm looking for is a number that's kind of in between 11 and 12, kind of like in between, but a little closer to 11, right? So like here's halfway between 11 and 12, but I'm looking for a number that's like a little closer to 11. So I'm looking for like this number. So that would be 11.4. This would be my estimate for the square root of 130. What about the square root of 35? Let's take a look. The square root of 35 is in between 25 and 36. Okay, so the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 36 is 6. So my number is in between 5 and 6, so it's 5 point something. And let's see, so let's say this is 5, this is 6. Okay, this time 35 is like, it's way closer to 36, right? It's only 1 away from 36, whereas if I were to count from 25 to 35, I'd have to count 10 times. So this time, I'm looking for a number between 5 and 6, but it's way closer to 6. So a good estimate here would be like 5.9, right? It's in between 5 and 6, but way closer to 6, okay? A little bit less than 6. So like the square root of 36 is 6. This number is a little bit less than 6. 5.9 is a good estimate.